$3 billion. That's what Victoria Chen was worth at the peak of her empire. To put that in perspective, she could buy a private island every week for a year and still have money left over. She owned penthouses in 3 countries. Her jewelry adorned princesses and pop stars. Her name was whispered in the same breath as Cartier and Tiffany. But here's what nobody tells you about building an empire: sometimes the cost isn't measured in dollars. This is the story of a woman who clawed her way from scrubbing floors in other people's mansions to owning showrooms that glittered brighter than the stars themselves. A woman who sacrificed love for ambition, softness for steel, and a simple life for a billion-dollar throne. And then, one necklace brought it all crashing down. Not because it was cursed, not because it was stolen, but because tucked beneath $40 million worth of sapphires was a note from the only man she'd ever loved. The man she'd walked away from. The man who'd just resurfaced with a message that would force her to choose between everything she'd built and everything she'd lost. Picture this: a rain-soaked Tuesday morning in Manhattan. Victoria's standing in her corner office, 70 floors above the city she conquered. In her hands, the most expensive piece of jewelry she's ever created, the Maharaja's moon. Her legacy. Her triumph. And underneath it, 5 words that made her hands shake for the first time in 7 years. You won. But did you? Now flash back with me to where it all began. A cramped Brooklyn studio apartment. Ramen for dinner 3 nights a week. A young woman sketching jewelry designs on stolen paper while the man she loved drafted buildings on the same kitchen table. They had nothing but each other and dreams too big for their tiny world. His name was Marcus Lauren. And when he slipped that copper wire ring on her finger under a broken streetlight, promising her forever, Victoria believed him. But forever ended the night she chose her empire over his heart. Before we dive into this incredible journey, and trust me, where this story goes will absolutely shock you, I want to be honest with you. This video took over 40 hours to research, 20 hours to write, and 30 hours to produce. Every detail you're about to hear was carefully verified and crafted to bring you the most compelling version of Victoria and Marcus's story. The betrayals, the sacrifices, the moments that will make your heart ache. If you appreciate that level of dedication, please hit the subscribe button right now. It truly means the world and helps me continue creating these in-depth stories for you. And here's a question I want you to think about. Have you ever wondered what separates those who build lasting wealth from those who lose everything, including themselves? Drop your thoughts in the comments below because Victoria's answer to that question will surprise you. Now, let me take you back to where the cracks first appeared. Because Victoria's empire wasn't built on diamonds and gold. It was built on something far more fragile. It was built on the grave of the only love she'd ever known. And 7 years later, that grave was about to open. Victoria Chen learned about hunger before she learned to read. Not the kind of hunger you feel skipping lunch. The kind that makes a 7-year-old girl understand that the world is divided into 2 types of people. Those who wear the jewelry, and those who clean the houses where it's kept. Her mother, Lin Chen, arrived in New York from Shanghai with $300 and a suitcase held together with rope. She spoke 17 words of English. She had a chemical engineering degree that American employers looked at like it was written in invisible ink. So Lin did what immigrants have done for generations. She cleaned. Monday through Friday, she scrubbed toilets in a Park Avenue penthouse owned by the Whitmore family, old money, the kind that came from railroads and real estate empires built a century ago. Saturdays, she cleaned a townhouse in Brooklyn Heights. Sundays, if they were lucky, she rested. Victoria would sometimes go with her. Picture a little girl sitting on the marble floor of a mansion, doing homework while her mother polished silver that cost more than their annual rent. The Whitmores had 3 children who never wore the same outfit twice. Victoria wore hand-me-downs from the church donation box. But here's the thing about Victoria, she was paying attention. She noticed how Mrs. Whitmore's friends would gasp over a new necklace. How a single piece of jewelry could make a woman the center of attention at a party. How diamonds seemed to give their wearers a kind of armor, a confidence that came from knowing they were wearing something valuable. One day, when Victoria was 9, she found a broken bracelet in the trash. Just a cheap costume piece, but to her it was treasure. She took it apart, studied how it was made, then reassembled it into something different. Something better. Her mother found her at the kitchen table at midnight, fingers raw from working with wire and borrowed pliers. "Mom, look," Victoria said, holding up her creation. "I made it beautiful again." Lin Chen's eyes filled with tears. Not because the bracelet was beautiful, though it was, but because she saw in her daughter something she'd lost in herself, the belief that broken things could be fixed, that you could take scraps and turn them into something worth keeping. Fast forward to Victoria at 17. She'd spent a decade perfecting her craft, designing jewelry in secret, dreaming of a world beyond her mother's cleaning routes. She applied to NYU's business program with a portfolio of designs sketched on the back of her homework assignments. The financial aid officer looked at her application and shook her head. "Your designs are impressive, but your family's income." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Victoria needed $43,000. She had $200 in savings from odd jobs. The math was brutal. But Victoria had inherited something from her mother, the refusal to accept no as the end of the conversation. She worked 3 jobs that summer. Breakfast shift at a diner in Queens. Afternoons at a jewelry repair shop in the Diamond District. Nights cleaning offices in Midtown. She slept 4 hours a night and lived on coffee and determination. The jewelry repair shop changed everything. The owner, an old Italian craftsman named Giuseppe, recognized her hunger, not for food, but for knowledge. He taught her techniques passed down through generations. How to set a stone so it caught the light perfectly. How to work with metals that cost more per ounce than she made in a month. "You have the hands," Giuseppe told her one afternoon, watching her repair a vintage Cartier piece. "But more important, you have the eye. You see what others miss." By August, Victoria had scraped together enough for her first semester. Barely. She'd figure out the rest later. New York University, fall semester. Victoria's dorm room was the size of a closet. Her roommate was a girl from Connecticut whose parents owned a chain of car dealerships. The roommate had more shoes than Victoria had possessions. But Victoria didn't care about the shoes. She cared about the education. Every lecture was a gold mine. Every textbook a key to a world she was determined to unlock. She met Marcus Laurent in Introduction to Business Finance. He walked in late, soaking wet from the rain, and took the empty seat next to her. When he smiled, apologetic, a little embarrassed, something in Victoria's carefully constructed walls shifted. Marcus was different from the other students. He wasn't legacy money or trust fund casual. He was a scholarship kid from Detroit, studying architecture because his father had been a construction worker who'd fallen off a scaffold when Marcus was 14. He built buildings on paper because his dad never got to finish the ones he'd started in real life. They bonded over being broke in a school full of rich kids. Over splitting dollar pizza slices and studying in the library because their dorm rooms were too depressing. Over dreams that felt simultaneously impossible and inevitable. Their first real conversation happened at 2 a.m. in the library during midterms. Victoria was sketching a necklace design in the margins of her economics textbook. Marcus leaned over to look. "That's beautiful," he said. "What is it?" "A dream," Victoria answered without thinking. Then she laughed, embarrassed. "I mean, it's a necklace design. I want to build a jewelry company someday." Marcus didn't laugh. He didn't tell her it was impractical or ask about her backup plan. He just said, "Show me more." They stayed in that library until dawn. Victoria showed him her portfolio, years of designs sketched on napkins, newspaper margins, anything she could find. Marcus showed her his architectural drawings, buildings that existed only in his imagination. "We're the same," Marcus said as the sun came up over Washington Square Park. "We're both trying to build something permanent in a world that keeps telling us we're temporary." Victoria felt something crack open in her chest. Something that felt dangerously like hope. By sophomore year, they were inseparable. By junior year, they were in love in that intense, all-consuming way that only makes sense when you're young and broke and the whole world feels like it's conspiring against you. They moved into a studio apartment in the East Village that was technically illegal. No windows in the bedroom, a bathroom so small you had to stand sideways. The rent was $800 a month, which felt like a fortune but was somehow manageable when split between two people working multiple jobs. Their kitchen table became a workspace. Marcus on one side with his architectural drawings. Victoria on the other with her jewelry designs. They'd work in comfortable silence, occasionally reaching across to hold hands, to remind each other they weren't alone in this fight. Marcus proposed on a Tuesday night in December. Not with a diamond ring, they couldn't afford that. With a ring he'd made himself from copper wire, twisted into an intricate knot that somehow held together despite being impossibly delicate. "It's not much," he said, kneeling on the cracked linoleum floor of their tiny apartment. "But it's a promise. When we make it, and we will make it, I'll replace this with something worthy of you. But for now, this is all I have. My heart and my hands and the promise that I'll build a life with you." Victoria said yes through tears. Not because she cared about the ring, though she loved it more than any diamond, but because Marcus saw her. Really saw her. Not the polished version she presented to the world. The scared girl underneath who was terrified that no matter how hard she worked, it would never be enough. They got married 6 months later at City Hall. Victoria wore a white dress from a thrift store. Marcus wore his only suit. Their witnesses were two strangers they pulled in from the hallway. That night, in their apartment that was really just one room pretending to be two, they made promises about the future. They'd build their careers together. They'd buy a house in Brooklyn. They'd travel to Italy and Japan. They'd have 2 kids and name them after artists. Victoria believed every word. She believed in forever. But belief and reality are two different things. The first crack appeared during their final semester at NYU. Victoria's senior thesis was a business plan for her jewelry company, Celestial Crown. She'd poured everything into it. Market research, financial projections, design portfolio, supplier contacts she'd cultivated through Giuseppe. Her professor gave her an A and said something that changed everything. "This isn't a thesis. This is a viable business. You should actually do this." Victoria showed Marcus that night, vibrating with excitement. "He thinks I can really do it. Start my company. Actually start it." Marcus pulled her into his arms. "Of course you can. You're the most determined person I've ever met. If you want this, you'll make it happen." But there was something in his voice. A hesitation. A shadow that Victoria chose to ignore because she was too caught up in possibility. The truth was, Marcus was scared. Not of Victoria's success. He wanted that for her desperately. But of what that success might cost. He'd seen it before. His uncle had started a business that consumed him. 18-hour days. Missed birthdays. A marriage that disintegrated under the weight of ambition. By the time the business sold, the uncle was wealthy and alone. Marcus didn't want wealth if it meant losing Victoria in the process. But he didn't say that. Not yet. Instead, he smiled and opened a bottle of cheap champagne and toasted to her future. Their future, he thought. But he was wrong. Graduation came and went. Marcus got a job at a small architecture firm in Tribeca. Decent salary, room for growth. He was excited, not passionate but content. He'd always wanted a life that was stable, comfortable. He'd seen what instability did to families. His father's death had taught him that security wasn't boring, it was precious. Victoria took a different path. She started Celestial Crown in their apartment with $5,000 she'd saved and a business loan that made her physically ill to sign. The interest rate was predatory. The terms were brutal. But it was a start. At first, Marcus was supportive. He'd come home from work to find their living room transformed into a workshop. Jewelry pieces spread across every surface. Victoria hunched over her workbench at 11 p.m., her hands steady even though her eyes were exhausted. "Come to bed," he'd say gently. "You can finish in the morning." 5 more minutes, Victoria would answer. It was never 5 minutes. The orders started small. A friend of a friend wanted a custom engagement ring. A boutique in Soho agreed to carry 3 of her pieces on consignment. A fashion blogger wore one of her necklaces in an Instagram post, and suddenly Victoria had 50 orders she couldn't fulfill fast enough. This is it, she thought. This is how empires begin. She was right. But she didn't realize that empires are built on sacrifice. And the first thing sacrificed is always intimacy. The fights started around their one-year wedding anniversary. They were supposed to have dinner at the little Italian restaurant where they'd had their first date. Marcus had made reservations. Victoria had promised she'd be there at 7. At 7:45, Marcus was sitting alone at the table. At 8:30, he paid for the bottle of wine he'd ordered and walked home. At 9:15, he found Victoria exactly where he'd left her that morning, at her workbench, so absorbed in her work she'd forgotten to eat, to sleep, to remember she had a husband. "I'm sorry," she said when she finally looked up. "I lost track of time. There was a problem with the setting and You forgot," Marcus said quietly. "Our anniversary. You forgot." Victoria felt something twist in her stomach. "Marcus," I said, "I'm sorry. I'll make it up to you. Tomorrow we can. Tomorrow you'll have another order. Another crisis. Another reason why your business is more important than us." The word "us" hung in the air like an accusation. "That's not fair," Victoria said, her voice rising. "I'm doing this for us. So we can have the life we talked about. The house, the travel." "I don't care about the house." Marcus's voice cracked. "I care about you. About us. We're supposed to be building a life together, Victoria. But you're building an empire and I'm just here. Waiting for you to remember I exist." They stared at each other across the cluttered apartment. Both breathing hard. Both right and both wrong. "I need to do this," Victoria said finally. "You know where I came from. You know what it was like. I can't go back to that. I won't." "I'm not asking you to go back," Marcus said, his voice soft now. Defeated. "I'm asking you to stay here. With me. In this moment. Just sometimes. Just occasionally remember that we matter as much as your business." But Victoria couldn't hear him. All she could hear was her mother's voice. "We are not lucky. We are not special. We have to work twice as hard to get half as far." She'd been working twice as hard her whole life. She couldn't stop now. The second year of marriage was worse. Celestial Crown exploded. A celebrity wore one of Victoria's pieces to the Met Gala. Vogue ran a feature calling her the future of American luxury. Orders poured in so fast Victoria had to hire help. First one person, then 5, then 15. She moved the company out of their apartment and into a small studio in the garment district. Then into a larger space in Midtown. Then into a proper showroom in the Diamond District. Each move felt like victory. Each victory required more time, more energy, more of Victoria's soul. Marcus tried to be patient. He really did. But patience has limits, and he was reaching his. They barely saw each other anymore. Victoria would leave before he woke up and come home after he'd gone to bed. When they did cross paths, they were strangers who happened to share an apartment. "I miss you," Marcus said one Sunday morning. The first morning in months they were both home at the same time. "I miss us." Victoria looked up from her laptop where she was reviewing supplier contracts. She wanted to say she missed him too. She wanted to close the laptop and spend the day with him like they used to. Walk through Central Park. Get brunch. Make love in the afternoon. But she had a presentation on Monday. A crucial meeting with an investor who could take Celestial Crown to the next level. 8 figures. Life-changing money. "I know," she said instead. "After this deal closes, things will slow down. I promise." But Marcus had heard that promise before. He didn't believe it anymore. The end came on a Thursday night in April, 3 years after graduation. Victoria's company was valued at $50 million. She'd made more money in 3 years than her mother had made in her entire life. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt hollow. Marcus was packing when she got home at midnight. Not in a fury. Not dramatically. Just quietly placing his clothes into the same duffel bag he'd brought to their apartment 4 years earlier. "What are you doing?" Victoria asked, though she knew. "Leaving," Marcus said simply. "I've taken a job in San Francisco. Architecture firm specializing in sustainable housing. It's a good opportunity." "San Francisco?" Victoria's voice was small. "That's 3,000 miles away." "Yeah." Marcus folded a shirt with careful precision. "About the same distance you've been from me for 2 years. Just making it official." Marcus, please. Don't do this. We can figure it out. I can. You can what? He finally looked at her. His eyes were red. He'd been crying. Work less? Choose me over your empire? We both know that's not true. And I'm tired, Victoria. I'm so tired of being the thing you fit in when you have 5 minutes. Of being the person you forget about when something more important comes up. You're not, Victoria started, but the words died in her throat. Because he was right. I love you, Marcus said, and his voice broke on the words. God, I love you so much it's killing me. But loving you isn't enough anymore. You chose your dream over us. And I respect that. I even understand it. But I can't keep living in the shadow of your ambition. He picked up his bag, walked to the door, then turned back one more time. I hope it's worth it, he said. I really do. I hope when you're standing in your showroom surrounded by millions of dollars in jewelry, you'll feel as full as I felt when it was just us and a kitchen table and enough love to fuel the world. Then he was gone. And Victoria stood in the apartment. Their apartment, except it was just hers now, and felt the magnitude of what she'd lost settle over her like a weighted blanket. She should have run after him. Should have begged him to stay. Should have admitted that he was right, that she'd been choosing her business over their marriage, that she'd been so focused on never being poor again that she'd forgotten about being loved. But she didn't. Because running after him would mean admitting she'd made a mistake. And Victoria Chen didn't make mistakes. She made calculated decisions. Strategic choices. At least, that's what she told herself. The next 7 years were a blur of success and silence. Victoria threw herself into Celestial Crown with an intensity that bordered on obsession. If she was going to lose Marcus, she'd make damn sure it was worth it. She'd build something so big, so impressive, so undeniably successful that no one could ever question her choice. She opened showrooms in Paris and Dubai. She hired the best craftsmen money could buy. She courted celebrities and royalty with the same precision she'd once used to design jewelry. Her pieces became status symbols. Wearing Celestial Crown meant you'd arrived. By 32, Victoria was worth $3 billion. She owned a penthouse in Manhattan, a villa in Tuscany, a beach house in Malibu. She traveled by private jet. She was photographed at every major fashion event. Forbes put her on their cover with the headline, "The Crown Jewel, How Victoria Chen Built a Billion-Dollar Empire." From the outside, she had everything. From the inside, she was empty. She dated, of course. Powerful men, successful men, men who looked good in a tuxedo and knew which fork to use at charity galas. But none of them felt like Marcus. None of them saw past the Ice Queen exterior to the scared girl underneath who was still trying to prove she deserved to exist. She kept the copper wire ring Marcus had made her. It sat in her nightstand drawer, tarnished and fragile. Sometimes, late at night when she couldn't sleep, she'd take it out and hold it. Remember what it felt like to be loved for who she was, not what she'd built. But mostly, she buried those feelings under spreadsheets and expansion plans and the relentless pursuit of more. More money. More success. More proof that she'd made the right choice. Which brings us back to that rain-soaked Tuesday morning. To the Maharaja's moon. To the note that changed everything. You won. But did you? Victoria stood in her corner office, surrounded by $3 billion worth of success, holding a message from the man she'd walked away from 7 years ago. Marcus was back. Not just in her city, in her building. The architecture firm she'd hired to design her new flagship store had assigned him as lead architect. She'd see his name on the contracts and felt her heart stop. But she'd told herself it was fine. Professional. She could handle it. Then the necklace arrived with that note, and Victoria realized nothing about this was fine. Because Marcus wasn't just back. He'd succeeded too. Built his own reputation as one of the most sought-after sustainable architects on the West Coast. Done exactly what she'd done, transformed pain into power. And now they'd be forced to work together. To see each other every day. To face what they'd lost and what they'd become in the aftermath. The Ice Queen's empire was about to melt. So here's my question for you. If you were born into Victoria's circumstances, raised in poverty, watching your mother break herself to survive, do you think you would have made the same choices? Would you have chosen love or ambition? Security or success? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Because as you're about to see, Victoria's about to discover that some choices can't be undone. And some necklaces don't adorn you, they strangle you with the weight of everything you sacrificed to wear them. The first meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a Monday. Victoria had spent the entire weekend preparing. Not for the presentation, she could pitch her flagship store renovation in her sleep. She was preparing for him. For seeing Marcus Laurent for the first time in 7 years. She'd imagined this moment 1,000 times. Sometimes she pictured herself cold, professional, untouchable. Other times she imagined breaking down, admitting everything she'd lost. But when he walked into her conference room at 9:03 a.m., every rehearsed scenario evaporated. Because Marcus looked good. Better than good. He'd filled out, traded the lean hunger of their college years for the solid confidence of a man who'd found his purpose. His suit was expensive but not flashy. His beard was new, neat, and deliberate. But his eyes were the same. Dark brown and impossibly warm. Those eyes looked at her now with something Victoria couldn't quite read. Not anger. Not longing. Something more complex. Something that made her want to run and stay simultaneously. Victoria, he said. Just her name. But the way he said it, like he was testing whether it still fit in his mouth, made her grip the edge of the conference table. Marcus. She kept her voice level. Business casual. Thank you for coming. Shall we begin? The meeting should have been straightforward. Victoria wanted a flagship store that would redefine luxury retail. Marcus's firm specialized in creating spaces that balanced commercial needs with environmental sustainability. On paper, it was a perfect match. In reality, it was torture. Marcus presented his initial concepts with the same careful precision he'd once used to explain architectural theory in their tiny apartment. But now he was talking about load-bearing walls and energy-efficient materials instead of dreams and tomorrows. Victoria's team loved everything. The design was stunning, all clean lines and natural light, spaces that made jewelry look like art rather than commerce. But Victoria couldn't focus on the architecture. She was too busy trying not to stare at Marcus's hands as he gestured at the renderings. Those hands had built her a ring from copper wire. Had held her face when she cried about her mother. Had traced patterns on her skin in the darkness of their bedroom. Victoria? Her CFO's voice cut through the memory. What do you think? What did she think? She thought this was a terrible idea. She thought working with Marcus was going to destroy the carefully constructed walls she'd spent 7 years building. She thought, it's perfect, she heard herself say. Let's move forward. Marcus's eyes met hers across the table. For just a second, something flickered there. Surprise? Pain? Then it was gone, replaced by professional courtesy. Great, he said. I'll need to spend some time in your current showrooms. Get a feel for the brand, the aesthetic, how customers interact with the space. Would this week work? No, Victoria wanted to say. Nothing about this works. You being here doesn't work. You wearing a suit that probably costs what our monthly rent used to be doesn't work. You looking at me like I'm a stranger doesn't work. This week is fine, she said instead. Marcus showed up the next morning with a leather notebook and a tape measure. Victoria had instructed her team to give him full access and stay out of his way. She planned to do the same. Let him work, keep her distance, maintain the boundary between past and present. That plan lasted approximately 45 minutes. She found him in the private consultation room where she met with her highest-tier clients. He was standing at the window, looking out at the Manhattan skyline, and something about his posture, the slight slump of his shoulders, the way his hand rested against the glass, pulled her into the room before she could stop herself. Quite a view, Marcus said without turning around. He'd known she was there. Of course he had. He'd always had a sixth sense for her presence. 87th floor, Victoria said, keeping several feet between them. On clear days, you can see all the way to New Jersey. Remember when we thought the 5th floor of our building was high? Marcus turned to face her. We'd stand on the fire escape and pretend we could see the ocean. Victoria's throat tightened. We were young. We were happy. It wasn't an accusation. Just a statement of fact. But it landed like one anyway. Marcus, don't. He held up a hand. I'm not here to rehash the past. You hired my firm to design your store. That's what I'm going to do. The rest of it doesn't matter anymore. But the way he said, doesn't matter, told Victoria it absolutely did matter. It mattered so much that pretending it didn't was the only way he could be in the same room with her. Your note, Victoria said, surprising herself. In the necklace box. What did you mean by it? Marcus studied her for a long moment. Exactly what it said. You won, Victoria. You built your empire. You became everything you said you would. I just wonder if it was worth the price. And what price was that? Us. The word hung in the air like a ghost. You chose this, he gestured at the office, the view, the empire, over us. And maybe that was the right choice for you. But I needed to know if you ever wonder about the life we didn't live. Victoria felt something crack inside her chest. Every day, she whispered before she could stop herself. Marcus flinched like she'd slapped him. Don't, he said again, but his voice was rough now. Don't tell me that. Not after 7 years. Not when you made your choice so clear. You left, Victoria said, and now she could hear her own voice shaking. You walked out. You were already gone. Marcus's control shattered. Physically you were there. But emotionally? You'd left me months before I packed that bag. I was just making it official. Saving us both from the slow death of a marriage where only one person showed up. The argument that followed was brutal and necessary. 7 years of silence had built up like pressure in a sealed container. It had to explode eventually. Victoria said things she'd never allowed herself to say. That she'd needed him to be patient just a little longer. That building Celestial Crown wasn't about greed, it was about survival, about proving she deserved to exist in spaces that had been closed to people like her mother. Marcus said things he'd buried under professional success and cross-country distance. That he'd supported her dreams until they became the only dreams that mattered. That he'd lost himself trying to be enough for someone who'd decided nothing would ever be enough. They circled each other in that consultation room like wounded animals, hurting and healing and hurting again with every word. I needed you to choose me, Marcus finally said, his voice exhausted. Just once. Just one time where you put us first. But you couldn't do it. And I don't blame you for that anymore. I understand why. I just wish. What? Victoria asked. What do you wish? I wish I'd been enough to fight for. He picked up his notebook and tape measure. I'll email you the preliminary measurements. We don't need to do this again. He was at the door when Victoria's voice stopped him. You were enough, she said. You were always enough. I was the one who wasn't. Marcus turned back, and the look on his face, God, the devastation and understanding and lingering love, nearly broke her. No, he said softly. You were enough too. We just wanted different things. And sometimes love isn't enough to bridge that gap. Then he left. And Victoria stood in the consultation room where she'd sold millions of dollars in jewelry to people who thought diamonds could fill the holes in their lives, and realized she was no different. The next 3 weeks were a special kind of hell. Marcus came to the office regularly, always professional, always polite. He'd nod at Victoria in the hallways. Send detailed emails about design decisions. Attend meetings where he'd present concepts with the enthusiasm of someone genuinely invested in the project. And Victoria slowly went insane. Because seeing him every day, watching him interact with her staff, charm her clients, bring the same creative passion to her store that he'd once brought to sketching buildings on their kitchen table, was a reminder of everything she'd lost. But it was more than that. It was seeing who he'd become. The boy she'd married had been ambitious but uncertain, driven but still figuring himself out. The man in her office was complete. Confident without arrogance. Successful without sacrificing his principles. Marcus had built a life after her. A good life. His firm was renowned for sustainable design. He'd won awards. Lectured at architecture conferences. He still lived in San Francisco, in a restored Victorian house in the Haight that he'd renovated himself. Victoria knew all this because she'd done what she swore she wouldn't do. She'd looked him up. Read every article. Watched every interview. tortured herself with glimpses of his life without her. What she didn't know was whether there was someone else. A partner. A girlfriend. A wife. She told herself she didn't want to know. She was lying. The breaking point came during a late-night work session. The flagship store design had hit a snag. A structural issue that required immediate attention if they wanted to stay on schedule. Victoria's team had gone home. Her assistant had left at 8. At 9 p.m., Victoria looked up to find Marcus standing in her doorway. "Heard about the structural problem," he said. "Thought I could help." They'd spent the next 3 hours bent over blueprints and engineering reports, trying to solve the issue. Somewhere around midnight, after discarding their fifth potential solution, Marcus laughed, frustrated and exhausted, and Victoria felt something shift. This was familiar. The two of them against a problem. Working in tandem. Finishing each other's thoughts the way they used to. "What if we redistribute the load here?" Victoria suggested, pointing to a section of the design. Marcus studied it. "That could work. But we'd need to reinforce the foundation, which adds cost." "I don't care about cost. I care about it being right." Marcus looked at her then. Really looked at her. "When did you become someone who doesn't care about cost?" It was a legitimate question. The Victoria he'd known had counted every dollar, saved every penny, lived in constant fear of financial insecurity. "When I had enough, that cost stopped mattering," Victoria said. "Then, more honestly, I still count every dollar. I just have more of them to count." "Does it help?" Marcus asked quietly. "Having the money you always wanted. Does it make you feel safe?" Victoria thought about her penthouse that echoed with emptiness. Her bank account that had more zeros than she could spend in 3 lifetimes. Her closet full of designer clothes she barely wore. "No," she admitted. "It doesn't. It just makes me feel like I sacrificed something precious for something meaningless." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. "It's not meaningless, Victoria. What you built, it's extraordinary. Your mother would be so proud." The mention of her mother broke something loose. Lin Chin had died 4 years ago. Heart attack. Quick and brutal. She'd never lived to see Victoria's empire at its peak, though she'd seen enough to know her daughter had succeeded. Victoria had been in Dubai when it happened, closing a deal with a princess who wanted a custom tiara. She'd gotten the call from the hospital and caught the first flight home, but by the time she landed, her mother was gone. At the funeral, Victoria had stood alone. No Marcus. No partner. Just her and her success and the crushing realization that she'd spent so much time proving her worth to the world that she'd forgotten to spend time with the person who'd always believed in her. "She asked about you," Victoria said now, surprising herself. "Before she died. She'd had the heart attack, but she was still conscious in the hospital. I got to talk to her for a few minutes before." She swallowed hard. "She asked if I was happy. And if you were happy. Said she always liked you. Thought we were good together." Marcus's jaw tightened. "What did you tell her?" "I lied. Said we were both doing great. Didn't want her last thoughts to be about my failures." "Victoria." "I'm not looking for sympathy," Victoria cut him off. I'm tired, Marcus. I'm so tired of pretending this is enough. That any of this matters without someone to share it with." The confession hung between them like a live wire, dangerous and electric and impossible to ignore. Marcus stood up, paced to the window. The Manhattan skyline glittered below them, millions of lights representing millions of lives. People in apartments and offices and restaurants. People who loved and fought and tried to figure out how to be happy. "I almost called you," Marcus said, his back still to her. "When I heard about your mother. I had my phone in my hand. Your number still saved. I wanted to be there for you. But I didn't know if you'd want that. If seeing me would make it worse." "It would have made it better," Victoria said. "Having you there would have made everything better." Marcus turned. In the low light of her office, he looked like the boy she'd married. Vulnerable. Open. Uncertain about what came next. "So what do we do now?" he asked. It was the question Victoria had been avoiding for weeks. Because answering it required admitting what she wanted. And what she wanted was terrifying. She wanted a second chance. She wanted to rewind 7 years and make different choices. She wanted to be the version of herself who could build an empire and keep the man she loved. But you can't rewind time. You can only move forward. And moving forward meant risking everything again. Admitting that maybe, just maybe, her empire wasn't enough. That success without love was just expensive loneliness. I don't know, Victoria admitted. I don't know if we can go back. If you can forgive me. If I can be different this time. I don't want you to be different, Marcus said, and his voice was so gentle it hurt. I never wanted you to be different. I just wanted to matter as much as your dreams. To be part of those dreams instead of an obstacle to them. You always mattered. Did I? Marcus took a step closer. Because from where I stood, it seemed like everything else mattered more. The business. The deals. The next level of success. I was proud of you, Victoria. I swear I was. But being proud of someone isn't the same as being important to them. The truth in his words cut deep. Because he was right. She'd made him an afterthought. Not deliberately. Not maliciously. But the result was the same. She'd chosen her empire over their marriage, deal by deal, late night by late night, missed anniversary by missed anniversary. I'm sorry, Victoria said, and the words felt inadequate but necessary. I'm so sorry. You deserved better than what I gave you. I know. Marcus's acceptance was harder to bear than anger would have been. And I'm sorry too. Sorry I couldn't understand that your drive came from trauma. That you were running from poverty the way I was running toward stability. We were both trying to heal old wounds. We just had different prescriptions. So where does that leave us? Marcus came closer. Close enough that Victoria could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes. Close enough that she could smell his cologne, different from what he'd worn when they were married. Everything about him was familiar and foreign simultaneously. I don't know, he said honestly. Part of me wants to walk out of this office and never look back. Protect myself from getting hurt again. But another part. What? Victoria whispered. What does the other part want? The other part wants to be stupid enough to believe we could get it right this time. That 7 years of growth might have made us compatible instead of combustible. That maybe we could figure out how to build lives that fit together instead of pull apart. Victoria's heart was hammering so hard she was sure Marcus could hear it. Is that what you want? To try again? I don't know what I want, Marcus admitted. Except that walking away from you 7 years ago was the hardest thing I've ever done. And being near you now is harder. Because you're not the girl I married. You're the woman she became. And I don't know if there's room in your life for anything besides your empire. It was the most honest thing either of them had said. And it required an equally honest answer. Victoria thought about the past 7 years. The deals she'd closed. The milestones she'd hit. The nights she'd stood alone in her penthouse, looking out at a city she'd conquered, feeling nothing but the cold satisfaction of achievement. She thought about her mother, asking if she was happy. She thought about the copper wire ring in her nightstand. She thought about what it felt like to be loved for who you were rather than what you'd built. And she thought about Marcus, standing in front of her, offering the possibility of something more terrifying than any business deal. A second chance. I don't know if there's room either, Victoria said slowly. I don't know if I can be different. If I can let someone in without feeling like I'm losing control. But I want to try. God, Marcus, I want to try so badly it scares me. Something flickered in Marcus's expression. Not quite hope. Not quite trust. But something softer than the walls he'd been maintaining. This won't be easy, he warned. I'm not the same person who walked out 7 years ago. I won't settle for scraps of your attention. I won't be patient while you choose work over us again and again. If we do this, it has to be different. What do you need? Victoria asked. Tell me what you need and I'll do it. Don't promise that, Marcus said firmly. Don't promise to change who you are. Just promise to try. To be honest when it's too hard. To not let us drift apart without fighting for us. Victoria nodded, tears she hadn't felt in years threatening to fall. I can promise that. I can promise to try. Marcus reached out then, slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his hand cupped her face the way it used to. His thumb traced her cheekbone. His eyes searched hers for something, truth, maybe. Certainty. Evidence that this wasn't another mistake. "I never stopped loving you," he whispered. "Tried. God knows I tried. But you don't stop loving someone just because they hurt you. You just learn to love them from a distance. And being this close to you again." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Victoria understood. Because she'd never stopped loving him either. She just convinced herself that love was a luxury she couldn't afford. They didn't kiss that night. That would have been too easy. Too much like falling into old patterns without doing the work to make those patterns healthy. Instead, Marcus stepped back. Put professional distance between them again. But something had shifted. The walls were still there, but they had cracks now. Light was getting through. "Finish the design," Victoria said. "Create something beautiful. And while you're doing that, let's figure out if we can create something beautiful too. No promises. No expectations. Just possibility." Marcus smiled then. Not fully. Not with the open joy he'd once had. But it was a start. "Possibility," he repeated. "I can work with that." He gathered his things and headed for the door. This time, when he reached it, he turned back. "Victoria? For what it's worth, you were always worth fighting for. Even when you couldn't see it." Then he left. And Victoria stood in her office, surrounded by the evidence of her success, and felt the first flutter of something she hadn't felt in 7 years. So here's the question I want you to consider. At this point, Victoria had to choose between protecting herself from potential heartbreak and risking everything for a second chance at love. She'd spent 7 years building walls to keep the pain out. Now she had to decide if she was brave enough to tear them down. What would you have done? Would you have played it safe and kept your empire intact? Or would you have risked it all for the possibility of love? This decision would define everything that came next. Because as you're about to see, second chances don't come with guarantees. Sometimes they come with costs even higher than the first time around. Trying to rebuild something you destroyed is harder than building it the first time. Victoria learned this lesson over the next 3 months as she and Marcus attempted something that felt simultaneously inevitable and impossible, figuring out if they could be in each other's lives without destroying each other again. They started small. Coffee meetings that were technically about the store design but inevitably drifted into personal territory. Lunch at the Italian restaurant where they'd had their first date. Neutral ground that held both good memories and ghosts. Walks through Central Park on Sunday mornings when the city was quiet and they could pretend they were just two people trying to find their way back to each other. But nothing about this was simple. Because Victoria was still Victoria, driven, ambitious, with a $3 billion empire that demanded constant attention. And Marcus was still Marcus, cautious now, guarded, with 7 years of scar tissue protecting his heart. The first real test came 3 weeks into their tentative reconnection. Victoria had an investor meeting in Los Angeles. Critical meeting. A venture capital firm wanted to pour $200 million into Celestial Crown's expansion into the Asian market. It was the kind of opportunity that could double her company's value within 2 years. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday. She'd be gone for 3 days, fly out Wednesday, meetings Thursday and Friday, back Saturday morning. But Thursday was also the day Marcus had invited her to a gallery opening. Not his work, a friend's exhibition. But he'd asked her specifically, said he wanted her to meet people from his life in San Francisco. His circle. His world. The old Victoria wouldn't have hesitated. Business first. Boys. Apologize later, make it up somehow, promise to do better next time. But she'd promised to try. To be different. To choose them over the empire at least sometimes. So Victoria did something that terrified her. She delegated. Sent her CFO to the Los Angeles meeting with full authority to negotiate terms. Trusted someone else to handle what she'd always handled herself. Her CFO was thrilled. Her board was confused. Her assistant looked at her like she'd grown a second head. And Victoria felt physically ill with anxiety. She was giving up control. Trusting others with her empire. What if they screwed it up? What if the deal fell through because she wasn't there? But Thursday night, Standing in a San Francisco gallery with Marcus's hand on the small of her back as he introduced her to his friends, Victoria realized something profound. The world didn't end when she wasn't in control. Her empire didn't crumble. The deal still happened. Her CFO negotiated terms even better than Victoria had planned. "You okay?" Marcus asked quietly, noticing her distracted expression. "I'm here," Victoria said. And it was true. She was actually present. Not thinking about the next meeting. Not checking her phone every 30 seconds. Just there. With him. Marcus smiled. Really smiled the way he used to, and pulled her closer. "Yeah. You are. But progress isn't linear. And old patterns die hard." The first major fight happened 6 weeks in. Victoria had promised to come to Marcus's place in San Francisco for the weekend. A real weekend, no work, no phones, just them figuring out if they could exist in the same space without combusting. Then her flagship store hit a crisis. A manufacturing defect in the display cases. The grand opening was scheduled in 3 weeks. If they didn't fix this immediately, they'd have to delay, which meant losing the momentum, disappointing clients who'd already made appointments, potentially millions in lost revenue. Victoria called Marcus at 11 p.m. on Friday, 3 hours before her flight was supposed to leave. "I can't come," she said, hating herself. "There's a crisis and I need to." "Don't." Marcus's voice was flat. "Don't do this. Marcus, please. This isn't optional. The store opening is more important than us." "Yeah. I got it the first time, Victoria. Took me a while to learn the lesson, but it stuck. That's not fair. This is different." "Is it?" Now his voice had an edge. "Because from where I'm standing it looks exactly the same. You promised. Said you'd try. Said you'd be different. But the first time something at work gets difficult, you bail on us." Victoria felt panic rising in her chest. "I'm not bailing. I'm asking for understanding. This is my business. My responsibility. And what am I?" Marcus interrupted. "Am I your responsibility? Or am I just the thing you fit in when nothing more important comes up?" The silence that followed was brutal. "I'll be there tomorrow," Victoria said finally. "I'll fix this tonight, delegate the follow-up, and catch the first flight out in the morning." "Don't bother." Marcus's voice was tired now. Defeated. "I don't want you here out of guilt. I want you here because you want to be here. Because I matter enough to choose. If you have to convince yourself to show up, then we're already done." He hung up, and Victoria stood in her office at 11 p.m. on a Friday night, surrounded by her empire, and felt the weight of her choices crushing her. She fixed the display case crisis. Personally oversaw every detail. Made calls at 3 a.m. to manufacturers in Italy. Threw money at the problem until it was solved. By 6 a.m. Saturday, it was handled. Then Victoria did something she'd never done before. She got on a plane to San Francisco anyway. Marcus wasn't expecting her. When he opened his door at noon and found her standing there, exhausted, wrung out, but there, he just stared. "I fixed it," Victoria said. "The crisis. It's handled. And I know you said not to come, but I'm here anyway because you're right. I've been making excuses for 7 years. Telling myself the business has to come first. That I'll make time for us later, when things slow down. But things never slow down. There's always another crisis. Another deal. Another reason to choose work." She took a shaky breath. "I'm here because I'm done choosing the empire over you. I'm done pretending that success means anything without someone to share it with. And I'm here to tell you that if I have to choose between Celestial Crown and us, I choose us." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. "You're serious?" "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." "What about the store opening?" "My team is handling it. I hired talented people. It's time I let them do what I pay them for." Marcus stepped back, opening the door wider. "You look like hell. I haven't slept in 36 hours. Come inside." He pulled her into his house. His beautiful, restored Victorian house that was so perfectly him it made her chest ache. "Sleep. We'll talk when you're human again." Victoria wanted to argue. To stay awake. to prove her commitment through exhaustion and determination. But Marcus was already guiding her to his bedroom, pulling back covers, creating space for her in his life. "Thank you," she whispered as sleep dragged her under, "for not giving up on me yet." "Yet," Marcus agreed softly. "But we'll see." Over the next month, they established a rhythm. Not easy, not perfect, but functional. Victoria spent 2 weekends a month in San Francisco. Marcus spent 1 weekend a month in New York. They had video calls at 9 p.m. every night, their sacred hour where work wasn't allowed. They sent each other photos of stupid things throughout the day. They fought about scheduling and priorities and the fundamental incompatibility of Victoria's need for control with Marcus's need for partnership. But they also laughed, remembered what it felt like to be each other's favorite person, discovered that 7 years apart had given them perspective they'd lacked when they were young and desperate and convinced love conquered everything. "We're building something different this time," Marcus said one Sunday morning, tangled in his sheets, sunlight streaming through his bedroom window. "Not replacing what we had. Creating something new." "Is it working?" Victoria asked, tracing patterns on his chest. "This, whatever we're doing? I don't know yet." Marcus was always honest now. Painfully so. "Some days I'm convinced we're going to make it. Other days I'm certain we're repeating old patterns with prettier packaging. But I'm still here. That counts for something." It did. But still here wasn't the same as committed forever. And Victoria was terrified that no matter how hard she tried, she'd never be enough to make him believe in them again. Then Victoria's world tilted on its axis. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Her head of security. Someone had broken into her New York showroom overnight. Not a typical robbery, they'd bypassed millions in easily accessible jewelry to target her safe. The one where she kept her most valuable pieces, including the Maharaja's moon. The necklace was gone. $40 million vanished. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what the thieves left behind. A note, printed on expensive cardstock, placed exactly where the necklace had been. "Empires built on sacrifice always come crashing down. You took everything from me. Now I'm taking everything from you. Someone who remembers." Victoria stared at the note, her mind racing. Someone who remembers what? She'd made enemies over the years. Cutthroat business created casualties. But this felt personal. Targeted. Vengeful. "We need to call the police," her security chief said. "The FBI. Insurance company. This is major theft." "Wait." Victoria held up a hand. Something about the note triggered a memory. The phrasing. "You took everything from me." Not, "You have everything," or, "You don't deserve this." Specifically took. Past tense. Action verb. Like she'd actively stolen something from someone. But Victoria had built her empire legally. Aggressively. Ruthlessly, sometimes. But legally. Hadn't she? The answer came 3 days later, during her interview with FBI investigators. They traced the theft to a sophisticated operation, professional criminals hired by someone with resources and motivation. "Do you have any enemies?" the lead agent asked. "Anyone with a grudge? Business rivals? Disgruntled employees?" Victoria started to say no, then stopped. Because there was someone. Someone from the early days. Someone she tried very hard to forget. "There might be someone," she said slowly. "A woman named Diana Volkova. We were in business together briefly about 8 years ago. It didn't end well." "Didn't end well how?" Victoria closed her eyes. This was the part of her story she never told. The darker chapter she'd buried under success and forward momentum. Diana and I were partners in the very beginning of Celestial Crown. Before it was worth anything. We'd met through Giuseppe, the craftsman who taught me jewelry repair. She was older than me, established artisan with connections I needed. I was young with designs that could be revolutionary. Victoria's voice went flat, the way it did when she had to discuss things that hurt. We partnered 50-50. She'd provide the manufacturing expertise and distribution network. I'd provide the designs and business strategy. For the first year, it worked beautifully. We were building something real. What changed? the agent asked. I did. Victoria forced herself to be honest. Diana wanted to stay small. Boutique operation. High-end custom pieces for a select clientele. It was safe. Sustainable. But I wanted more. I wanted to scale. To build something that would make my mother's sacrifices worth it. She paused, remembering those terrible months. I found investors willing to pour money into expansion. But they only wanted me, my designs, my vision, my business plan. Diana's old-world craftsmanship didn't fit their Silicon Valley growth model. So you pushed her out, the agent said. Not judging. Just stating facts. I bought her out, Victoria corrected. For market value at the time, $50,000. It seemed fair then. The company was barely breaking even. But 3 months later, with the investor money, Celestial Crown exploded. Within a year, the company was worth $20 million. Within 3 years, $100 million. Victoria looked at her hands. Diana sued me. Claimed I'd defrauded her, that I'd hidden the investor negotiations during buyout discussions. The lawsuit lasted 2 years. It was brutal and public and destroyed her reputation. I won, ultimately. The court found I'd done nothing illegal. But morally, she trailed off. Because even now, even after building a $3 billion empire, that victory tasted like ash. Marcus found out through the news. Because of course it made the news, billion-dollar jewelry theft, FBI investigation, old lawsuits dragged back into the light. Every business decision Victoria had ever made was suddenly under scrutiny. He showed up at her penthouse unannounced. Victoria opened the door to find him standing there, phone in hand, news article pulled up. Were you going to tell me? He asked quietly. About Diana? About how you built your empire. It wasn't relevant. Wasn't relevant? Marcus pushed past her into the apartment. Victoria, someone is targeting you. Someone you allegedly destroyed. And you didn't think that was worth mentioning? Even after we've spent the last 3 months trying to be honest with each other? I didn't destroy her, Victoria said defensively. I bought her out legally. What happened after wasn't my fault. Are you serious right now? Marcus spun to face her. You bought her out for $50,000 and 3 months later the company was worth millions. You're telling me you had no idea that was coming? That you didn't hide those investor negotiations? Victoria felt her walls slam back up. I did what I had to do to survive. To build something. Diana wanted to stay small and safe. I couldn't afford safe. You of all people should understand that. Don't. Marcus's voice was sharp. Don't use our history to justify destroying someone who trusted you. That's not surviving. That's calculated betrayal. She would have held me back. Victoria's voice rose. Kept me trapped in a boutique operation making just enough to scrape by. I would have ended up like my mother, working myself to death with nothing to show for it. So instead you became the person who destroys others to get ahead? Marcus asked. Is that really better? The question hung between them like a physical thing. Victoria sank onto her designer couch in her multi-million-dollar penthouse and felt the weight of her choices finally catch up with her. I told myself it was different, she said quietly. That I'd given Diana fair market value. That she could have negotiated better terms if she'd been smarter. That I didn't owe her anything beyond what the contract stated. She looked up at Marcus, and for the first time in years, let him see the truth behind her armor. But you're right. I knew those investors were coming. I knew what was about to happen. And I bought Diana out anyway because I wanted all of it. Not half. Not a partnership. All of it. Marcus sat down across from her. Not next to her. The distance felt intentional. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was ashamed, Victoria admitted. Because you already left me once for choosing ambition over ethics. If you knew how I'd built this empire, what I'd done, who I'd hurt, you'd never look at me the same way. You're right, Marcus said. I wouldn't. He was quiet for a moment. But I also wouldn't have judged you the way you think. Victoria, I've always known you were ruthless. That's not news. What hurts is that you didn't trust me enough to be honest. That even now, even after everything, you're still hiding parts of yourself. I'm not hiding. You are. Marcus leaned forward. You're hiding the parts you think make you unlovable. The parts that are driven and ambitious and sometimes cruel. But those parts are you too. And if we're going to do this, really do this, you have to let me see all of you. Not just the version you think I'll accept. The FBI investigation intensified. They tracked Diana Volkova to Moscow, where she'd moved 3 years ago after her reputation in the U.S. jewelry industry was destroyed. She had motive, means, and, according to financial records, had recently spent a significant amount hiring people for consultation services. But they couldn't prove she'd ordered the theft. And even if they could, extradition from Russia was nearly impossible. The Maharaja's moon was gone. $40 million vanished. And Victoria's insurance company was conducting their own investigation, questioning whether she'd been negligent in her security measures. The flagship store opening had to be postponed. Investors were nervous. Her board demanded answers she didn't have. The press had a field day with the Ice Queen's karma angle, suggesting that Victoria's ruthless business practices had finally caught up with her. For the first time since building Celestial Crown, Victoria's empire felt fragile. Vulnerable. One more crisis away from serious damage. And through it all, Marcus stayed. Not because everything was fixed between them. Not because he'd forgiven her completely. But because he'd made a choice to be there for her even when it was hard. I don't understand, Victoria said one night, exhausted from another day of FBI interviews and damage control. Why are you still here? I lied to you. Built my success on someone else's destruction. Proved I'm exactly the person you left 7 years ago. Marcus considered this. You're not exactly that person. That person would have handled this crisis alone. Would have pushed everyone away rather than show vulnerability. But you're letting me see you scared. Uncertain. Human. He reached for her hand. That's growth, Victoria. Imperfect, messy growth. But it counts. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Giuseppe, Victoria's old mentor. He called her personally, said he had information about Diana. They met at his shop in the Diamond District, the same cramped, dusty space where Victoria had learned her craft as a teenager. Giuseppe was in his 70s now, hands still steady, eyes still sharp. Diana came to see me, he said without preamble. 6 months ago. Asked about you. What you were doing. Whether you ever talked about her. Victoria's heart raced. What did you tell her? The truth. That you'd built something extraordinary. That you'd become everything you said you'd become. Giuseppe paused. She cried. Right there in my shop. Said she taught you too well. That she'd shown you how to see opportunities but forgot to teach you about consequences. Giuseppe. Let me finish. The old man held up a hand. Diana told me something else. Said that stealing your necklace wasn't about the money. It was about making you feel what she felt, the loss of something precious you'd poured your soul into creating. She wanted you to understand what it's like to have something taken from you. Victoria felt sick. Where is she now? Gone. Left Moscow. The necklace is gone too, sold to a private collector who won't ask questions. You'll never get it back, Victoria. That's her point. Some things, once you lose them, you can't recover. Giuseppe looked at her with something like pity. I taught you to work with precious metals. To create beauty from raw materials. But I didn't teach you the most important lesson. Everything precious has a cost. And sometimes that cost is paid by people who trusted you. Victoria shared Giuseppe's information with the FBI, but it didn't change anything. No evidence that would stand up in court. No way to recover the necklace. No justice for the theft. Just the brutal lesson that consequences are real. That you can't build an empire on other people's dreams without those people eventually demanding payment. That night, Victoria made a decision. She called a press conference. Against her lawyer's advice. Against her board's recommendations. She stood in front of cameras and told the truth. 8 years ago, I entered a business partnership with Diana Volkova. She was instrumental in helping me launch Celestial Crown. When I had the opportunity to scale the business beyond what our partnership could support, I bought her out for fair market value at that time, $50,000. 3 months later, the company's value had increased exponentially. Victoria took a breath. Legally, I did nothing wrong. But morally, I made a choice that prioritized my success over honoring the partnership that made that success possible. Diana helped build the foundation of Celestial Crown. She deserved to share in its growth. I took that from her. The press room erupted with questions. Victoria held up a hand. I'm announcing today that I'm establishing the Diana Volkova Fund, a $20 million investment fund to support emerging artisan jewelers. Specifically those who've been pushed out by corporate consolidation in the luxury goods industry. It won't repair the damage I did. But it's a start. The press conference changed everything. Some called it a publicity stunt. Others said it was too little, too late. But investors saw it differently. They saw a CEO willing to take responsibility for past mistakes. To learn. To grow. More importantly, Marcus saw it differently. That took courage, he said that night. They were back in Victoria's penthouse, the one that had felt so empty for so long but somehow felt less lonely now. It felt necessary, Victoria replied. Giuseppe was right. I can't get the necklace back. But I can try to be different going forward. To build something that doesn't require destroying others. Marcus pulled her close. You know what I realized? We're both trying to become better versions of ourselves. Not perfect, just better. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's what second chances are actually about, not fixing what broke the first time, but building something new from the pieces. Victoria leaned into him, feeling something shift in her chest. Not certainty. Not the promise of a happy ending. Just the possibility that maybe they could figure this out. Do you think Victoria should have handled the Diana situation differently 8 years ago? Or was she right to prioritize her business growth, even at the cost of her partnership? Share your perspective below, because the answer isn't as simple as it seems. We're at the midpoint of this incredible story. If you're still here, if you've stayed with Victoria and Marcus through their mistakes, their growth, their messy attempt at second chances, I genuinely appreciate you. What's kept you engaged so far? Is it the romance? The business drama? The question of whether someone can truly change? Let me know in the comments. Because the second half of this story is going to test everything Victoria and Marcus have rebuilt. And some tests don't come with easy answers. Change doesn't announce itself with trumpets and fanfare. It happens quietly. In small decisions that compound over time. In moments when you choose differently than you did yesterday, last month, 7 years ago. For Victoria Chen, change began with a single word, no. 3 months after the press conference about Diana Volkova, Victoria's board presented her with an opportunity that would have made the old Victoria salivate. A hostile takeover bid for a struggling competitor, a family-owned jewelry company in Milan that had been in business for 4 generations. They were drowning in debt. Vulnerable. Ripe for acquisition. The numbers were beautiful. Celestial Crown could absorb their craftsmanship, their European client base, their prestige. It would cost $85 million but add $300 million in value within 2 years. Victoria looked at the proposal, saw the opportunity, understood exactly how to execute it, and said the word that shocked everyone in the room. No. Her CFO blinked. I'm sorry, what? No. We're not doing it. Victoria closed the folder. This family has been building their reputation for 100 years. We're not going to be the corporation that destroys that because they hit a rough patch. Victoria, this is business. I know what this is. She stood up. And I'm saying no. Find us opportunities that don't require destroying someone else's legacy. That's the new direction. The decision cost her. 3 board members resigned, furious that she was going soft. Investors questioned whether she'd lost her edge. Stock analysts downgraded Celestial Crown's growth projections. But Marcus, when she told him about it that night, pulled her into his arms and said something that made everything worth it. I'm proud of you. 4 words. But they landed in Victoria's chest like a revelation. Because she'd spent her entire life chasing success, building empires, accumulating wealth, and none of it had felt as good as hearing those 4 words from the man she'd lost by forgetting what actually mattered. I'm trying, Victoria said against his shoulder. To be different. Better. But it's hard. Every instinct tells me to take opportunities, to grow, to conquer. Saying no feels like surrender. It's not surrender, Marcus said. It's wisdom. You're learning to build success that doesn't require casualties. That's not weakness. That's evolution. Evolution. Victoria liked that word. It suggested transformation was possible. That she wasn't doomed to repeat the same patterns forever. The flagship store finally opened 6 months after the Maharaja's moon theft. Not with the stolen necklace as its centerpiece, but with something more meaningful. A collection Victoria designed specifically for the opening, called Second Chances. Each piece in the collection incorporated repurposed materials. Diamonds reset from estate jewelry. Gold melted down from broken chains and damaged pieces. Beauty created not from scratch, but from transformation. The collection was a metaphor so obvious it was almost embarrassing. But Victoria didn't care. She was done hiding her truth behind polish and pretense. The opening night was spectacular. Celebrities, socialites, industry leaders, everyone who mattered in New York's luxury market. The store itself was Marcus's masterpiece. Sustainable materials, natural light, spaces that made jewelry feel like art rather than commerce. Victoria stood in the middle of it all, watching people move through the space Marcus had created, admiring the jewelry she designed, and felt something she hadn't felt in years: contentment. Not triumph. Not the adrenaline of conquest. Just quiet satisfaction with something created through collaboration rather than domination. Marcus found her standing alone near the window displays. "Penny for your thoughts?" "Just thinking about how different this feels from my first showroom opening," Victoria said. "Then, I was terrified someone would realize I didn't belong there. That I was just a poor girl playing dress-up in a rich person's world. And now I realize I was never playing dress-up. I was always supposed to be here. I just took a painful route to figure it out." Marcus slipped his hand into hers. The gesture was casual, natural. But it represented something profound: permission to be vulnerable in public. The old Victoria would never have allowed such open affection at a business event. Image was everything. Control was paramount. The new Victoria was learning that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let people see you care about something more than your empire. The Diana Volkova Fund launched quietly 2 months after the store opening. No press conference this time. No publicity stunt. Just Victoria working with a team of advisors to identify talented artisan jewelers who needed support. The first recipient was a woman from Detroit, Marcus's hometown, not coincidentally. She'd been designing jewelry in her basement, selling pieces at craft fairs, dreaming of something bigger but lacking the capital to make it happen. Victoria gave her $50,000 and 6 months of mentorship. Not charity. Investment. Partnership. The kind Diana Volkova should have received 8 years ago. "Why are you doing this?" the woman asked during their first mentorship session. She was younger than Victoria, maybe 25, with hungry eyes that reminded Victoria of herself at that age. "Because someone gave me a chance once," Victoria said. "Several people, actually. And I didn't always honor those chances the way I should have. This is me trying to do better." The woman looked skeptical. "You're Victoria Chen. You don't need to do better. You're already at the top." "The top is lonely," Victoria said honestly. "And hollow if you got there by stepping on people who trusted you. I'm learning there's a different way to build success. A way that lifts others instead of crushing them." Over the next 6 months, the fund supported 12 more artisans. Some succeeded. Some failed. But all of them got a fair chance. Something Victoria hadn't given Diana. The personal transformation was harder than the professional one. Because changing how you run a business is one thing. Changing who you are in a relationship is entirely different. Victoria and Marcus had been doing the long-distance thing for almost a year now. New York to San Francisco. Weekends and video calls. It worked mostly. But both of them knew it wasn't sustainable forever. The conversation about what came next started on a Sunday morning in Marcus's San Francisco house. They were having breakfast, Victoria making eggs while Marcus read the newspaper, both of them moving around the kitchen in comfortable synchronization that felt earned rather than automatic. "I've been thinking," Marcus said, not looking up from the paper, My lease is up in 3 months. Victoria's heart stuttered. Okay. I could renew it. Stay here. Keep doing what we're doing. He finally looked up. Or I could not renew it. The implication hung in the air like a question neither of them was quite ready to ask directly. What do you want? Victoria asked carefully. I want to stop living in 2 cities, Marcus said. I want to wake up next to you more than 4 days a month. I want to build a life instead of scheduling one. Marcus, let me finish. He stood up, came around the counter. I'm not saying this to pressure you. I know Celestial Crown is in New York. I know your whole life is there. But I need to know if you can imagine a version of the future where we're in the same place. Not visiting. Actually living together. Victoria's mind raced. The practical part of her immediately started problem solving. Marcus could move to New York. She could open a San Francisco office. They could split time between both cities. Stop, Marcus said gently, reading her expression. Stop trying to engineer a solution. Just tell me what you want. Forget the logistics. Forget the business implications. What do you want? And that was the question, wasn't it? What did Victoria want when all the external considerations were stripped away? I want you, she said simply. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to argue about whose turn it is to do dishes. I want boring Sunday afternoons and inside jokes and the kind of intimacy that only comes from sharing space and life and mundane moments. Then we figure out the logistics, Marcus said. Together. Not you solving it alone. Not me making demands. Together. The solution, when it came, surprised both of them. Victoria could run Celestial Crown from anywhere. She had vice presidents and regional managers. The company was mature enough that she didn't need to personally oversee every decision. The realization that her empire didn't require her constant presence was both liberating and terrifying. But Marcus's architecture work was different. His projects required him to be on site, to work with local builders and city planners. His career was less portable than hers. So Victoria did something that would have been unthinkable a year ago. She proposed splitting their time. 6 months in New York, 6 months in San Francisco. Not visiting. Actually living in both places. Establishing homes in both cities. Building a life that honored both their careers without sacrificing their relationship. You'd do that? Marcus asked when she presented the idea. You'd leave New York for half the year? I'd do more than that, Victoria said honestly. But let's start here and see how it goes. They moved in together, both places simultaneously, 3 months later. It was chaos. Furniture decisions and closet negotiations and figuring out how 2 people who'd lived alone for 7 years could share space without killing each other. But it was also beautiful. Coming home to someone. Making dinner together. Falling asleep tangled up in each other. The quiet intimacy of shared life that Victoria had almost forgotten existed. Professional success followed personal contentment in ways Victoria hadn't anticipated. With her mind less consumed by empire building and more focused on sustainable growth, she made better decisions. More ethical ones. More creative ones. Celestial Crown launched a sustainability initiative, recycled materials, ethical sourcing, transparent supply chains. It was expensive. It cut into profit margins. But it positioned the company as an industry leader in responsible luxury. The press loved it. Consumers loved it even more. Within 6 months, revenue had increased by 40%, not despite the ethical focus, but because of it. People wanted to buy from companies that aligned with their values. Victoria's board, the members who'd stayed after the Milan decision, were impressed. More than that, they were excited. This wasn't just good PR. It was good business. Proof that you didn't have to be ruthless to be successful. You've changed the entire culture here, her CFO said during a quarterly review. 18 months ago, we were a company focused purely on growth and profit. Now we're a company focused on growth, profit, and purpose. It's remarkable. Victoria thought about Diana Volkova. About the Maharaja's moon, still missing, still a reminder of consequences. About all the choices that had brought her to this moment. I learned an expensive lesson, she said. That success built on other people's destruction eventually destroys you too. This is me trying to build something that lasts. Something I can be proud of beyond the dollar amount. Then, 11 months after Marcus moved in, Victoria found something in her nightstand drawer while looking for her reading glasses. The copper wire ring. The one Marcus had made her when they were broke college students planning a life together. She'd kept it all these years. Through the divorce. Through 7 years of silence. Through the rebuilding. A talisman of what they'd once been. She was holding it when Marcus came into the bedroom. "I forgot that was still there," he said, seeing what she was looking at. "I'm surprised you kept it." "I could never bring myself to throw it away," Victoria admitted. "It was the last thing I had from when we were happy. Before I ruined everything." Marcus sat next to her on the bed. "You didn't ruin everything. We both made choices. I left instead of fighting harder. You chose your empire instead of asking for help. We were both scared kids who didn't know how to balance love and ambition." "We're not kids anymore." "No," Marcus agreed. "We're not." He took the copper ring from her hand, studied it. The wire was tarnished, the knot slightly loosened. It had survived years in a drawer, but it was fragile. Temporary. Never meant to last forever. "I told you I'd replace this with something worthy of you when we made it," Marcus said. "Took me longer than expected." From his pocket he pulled out a small box. Inside was a ring, not flashy, not covered in diamonds. Just a simple platinum band with a single sapphire. Elegant. Timeless. Perfect. "I'm not proposing," Marcus said quickly. "Or maybe I am. But not in the traditional sense. I'm proposing that we choose each other. Every day. Consciously. That we build a life where both of us matter. Where success includes love instead of excludes it." Victoria felt tears sliding down her face. "When did you get this?" "6 months ago. I've been carrying it around, waiting for the right moment. But I realize there is no right moment. Just this moment. Just us, figuring it out together." Victoria took the ring. Slid it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. Marcus had always paid attention to details. "Yes," she said. "To all of it. To choosing each other. To building something that honors both of us. To doing it differently this time." Marcus kissed her then. Soft and sure. And Victoria felt something click into place that had been broken for 7 years. They didn't have a traditional wedding. Neither of them wanted that. Instead, they had a small gathering at the flagship store Marcus had designed. The one that represented their combined creativity and vision. 20 people. No press. Just the people who'd supported them through the destruction and rebuilding. Giuseppe was there, in his only suit, crying openly. Victoria's team from Celestial Crown. Marcus's partners from his architecture firm. Friends who'd watched them fall apart and somehow find their way back together. Victoria wore a dress she'd designed herself. Simple, elegant, nothing like the elaborate gown she'd imagined for a wedding when she was young. Marcus wore the suit from their first meeting after 7 years apart, because he was sentimental like that. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves. Not promises about forever, they'd learned that forever was built day by day, choice by choice. But promises about presence. About choosing each other even when it was hard. About building success that included love rather than sacrificed it. "I promise to remember that my empire is meaningless if I'm alone at the top," Victoria said, her voice steady despite the tears. "I promise to choose us when every instinct tells me to choose work. I promise to trust you enough to be vulnerable. To need you. To admit when I'm scared. I promise to understand that your ambition isn't a threat to us," Marcus said. "I promise to support your dreams while protecting our relationship. I promise to call you out when you're falling into old patterns. And I promise to believe we can do this, even on days when it seems impossible." They kissed. Everyone clapped. And Victoria felt something she'd spent $3 billion trying to find. The year that followed was the best of Victoria's life. Not because everything was perfect, it wasn't. They still fought. Still struggled with balance. Still had moments when old patterns threatened to resurface. But they'd learned to recognize those moments. To pause. To choose differently. To remember that they were building something together, not competing for space in each other's lives. Celestial Crown continued to grow, slower than before, but more sustainably. Victoria promoted her CFO to COO, giving her genuine authority to make decisions without constant approval. She spent 3 days a week in the office and 4 days working remotely, splitting her time between New York and San Francisco. Marcus's firm opened a New York office, making it easier for him to take projects in both cities. He was designing a sustainable housing complex in Brooklyn, a community center in Oakland, buildings that served people rather than just making statements. They traveled together, Italy, Japan, the places they dreamed of visiting when they were broke and hopeful. They bought art, collected memories, built a life that was rich in the ways that actually mattered. And slowly, carefully, they talked about the future. Not just careers and logistics, but family, children, the possibility of creating something beyond themselves. "I'm scared," Victoria admitted one night in their San Francisco house. They were in bed, the city lights filtering through the windows Marcus had specifically designed to catch the sunset. "I don't know how to be a mother. I barely knew my own mother. She was always working. What if I repeat her patterns? What if I build an empire but lose my family in the process?" Marcus pulled her closer. "Then we'll figure it out together. Set boundaries. Make different choices. Your mother did what she had to do to survive. You have resources she never had. Options she couldn't imagine. Use them. What if I'm not good at it? Then you'll learn," Marcus said simply. "The same way you learned to build a billion-dollar company from scratch. The same way you learned to let someone in after 7 years of walls. You'll learn. We'll learn. Together." At this point, Victoria has transformed into someone completely different from the woman who chose her empire over love 7 years ago. She's learned to delegate, to trust, to value relationships over revenue, to measure success in moments rather than millions. But here's the question I want you to consider. Do you think people can truly change at their core? Or does our fundamental nature stay the same, just with better management? Because this is important for what comes next. Victoria believes she's different. Marcus believes she's different. But belief and reality don't always align. And sometimes the universe sends a test to see if your transformation is real or just a beautiful illusion. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning, 18 months after Victoria and Marcus had remarried. The International Jewelry Guild's annual gala in Geneva, the most prestigious event in the luxury jewelry industry. Victoria had attended before, multiple times, always as a guest of honor, always networking, always working. But this year's invitation was different. This year, they were honoring someone with a Lifetime Achievement Award for contributions to artisan jewelry preservation. Diana Volkova. Victoria stared at the invitation for a full minute. Marcus, making coffee in their New York kitchen, noticed her stillness. "What is it?" he asked. Victoria handed him the invitation without speaking. Watched his face as he read it. Saw understanding dawn. "Are you going?" Marcus asked carefully. "I don't know." Victoria's voice was steady, but her hands weren't. "Part of me thinks I should face her, acknowledge what I did. But another part thinks my presence would be cruel. A reminder of everything she lost." Marcus set down the invitation. "What does you want to do?" And there it was. The question Marcus always asked. Not what she should do. What she wanted. "I want to apologize," Victoria said quietly. Face to face. Not through a press conference or a charitable fund. "I want to look her in the eye and tell her I was wrong. That I'm sorry. That she deserved better." "Then we go," Marcus said simply. "Together." The flight to Geneva gave Victoria too much time to think. To remember. To rehearse apologies that all sounded inadequate. What do you say to someone whose life you derailed? How do you apologize for stealing someone's dream and building your empire on its corpse? "Stop spiraling," Marcus said, reaching for her hand across the first-class cabin. They could afford first class now, both of them. But Victoria still felt guilty about it sometimes, remembering when they'd shared dollar pizza and considered that a splurge. "I'm not spiraling. I'm preparing." "You're catastrophizing." Marcus smiled gently. Diana might not even want to talk to you. She might ignore you completely. You can't control how she responds. You can only control what you say and how you say it. When did you become so wise? Around the same time you became someone who cared about apologizing instead of defending herself. Marcus kissed her hand. Growth looks good on both of us. The gala was held at a historic hotel overlooking Lake Geneva, the kind of place where European royalty once held court. Crystal chandeliers and marble floors and the scent of old money. Victoria had attended events like this 100 times. But tonight felt different. Tonight she wasn't here to network or close deals. She was here to face her past. Diana Volkova was being honored at 8 p.m. Victoria arrived at 7:45, deliberately early. She wanted to see Diana before the ceremony. Needed to say what she'd come to say without an audience. She found Diana in a private room off the main ballroom. Through the partially open door, Victoria could see her, older now, hair more gray than brown, but still carrying herself with the dignified grace Victoria remembered from their brief partnership. Diana was alone, adjusting her dress in the mirror. The dress was beautiful but not expensive. Hand-sewn, Victoria noted. Probably by Diana herself. The kind of artisan craftsmanship that had once been Diana's signature. Victoria knocked softly. Diana turned. And for 3 seconds, neither woman moved. Victoria Chen. Diana's voice was controlled. Neutral. Impossible to read. I wondered if you'd come. I almost didn't, Victoria admitted, stepping into the room. Marcus stayed in the hallway. This conversation needed to happen alone. I thought my presence might be unwelcome. It is. Diana said it without malice. Just fact. But I appreciate the honesty. Victoria nodded. She'd expected nothing less. I came to apologize. Not publicly. Not for show. Just to tell you that you were right. About everything. I did know those investors were coming when I bought you out. I did hide the true value of what we'd built. And I've spent the last 2 years trying to become someone who wouldn't make that choice again. Diana studied her. The Diana Volkova Fund. The sustainability initiatives. The press conference where you admitted wrongdoing. I've followed your transformation with interest. It's not enough, Victoria said. I know that. No amount of charitable funds can give you back what I took. But I needed you to know that I'm trying. To be better. To build success that doesn't require destroying people who trusted me. Why now? Diana asked. Why after all these years do you suddenly care about making amends? It was a fair question. And it deserved an honest answer. Because I lost something precious by being the person who hurt you, Victoria said. I lost my husband. My integrity. My ability to look at myself in the mirror and feel anything but shame. And when I finally started rebuilding, when I started trying to become someone worth loving again, I realized I couldn't move forward without acknowledging the past. Diana walked to the window. The Swiss Alps were visible in the distance, snow-capped and eternal. When she spoke, her voice was softer. You destroyed me, Victoria. Not just financially. Personally. My reputation in the industry was ruined. Collectors who'd commissioned work from me canceled their contracts. Other artisans I'd mentored refused to work with me, afraid they'd be tainted by association with someone who'd lost to corporate consolidation. She turned back. I moved to Moscow because there was nothing left for me here. Started over in a place where no one knew about my failure. Built a small practice serving local clients. Nothing like what we had. Nothing like what we could have been. Victoria felt each word like a physical blow. I'm sorry, she whispered. Those words are inadequate, but they're all I have. I'm deeply, profoundly sorry for what I did to you. Diana nodded slowly. I believe you. But believing you're sorry doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't give me back the 15 years I lost rebuilding. It doesn't restore the partnerships that dissolved or the opportunities that vanished. I know. Victoria forced herself to hold Diana's gaze. If there's anything I can do, anything that would make even a small difference, please tell me. Not from guilt. From genuine desire to repair what I broke. Diana laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. You can't repair it, Victoria. That's the lesson you need to learn. Some damage is permanent. Some choices can't be undone. You can apologize. You can change. You can build funds and initiatives and become a better person. But you can't give me back my 30s and 40s. You can't restore my reputation in the markets that matter. You can't undo the trauma of watching everything I'd built crumble. The words landed like hammer blows. Because Diana was right. Victoria had spent 2 years trying to atone, to fix, to make things right. But some things couldn't be fixed. Some consequences were permanent. You're right, Victoria said finally. I can't repair it. All I can do is acknowledge it, carry it, and try to ensure I never make choices like that again. Good. Diana straightened her dress, preparing to return to the gala. Because that's the only thing that matters. Not your apology. Not your guilt. Your choices. What you do going forward. Whether you become someone who builds without destroying. She paused at the door. The Maharaja's moon. That was me, in case you wondered. I hired people to steal it because I wanted you to understand what it felt like to lose something precious you'd poured your soul into creating. Did it work? Victoria nodded. It did. Good. Diana's expression was unreadable. Then maybe we both learned something from this. The ceremony was beautiful. Diana accepted her Lifetime Achievement Award with grace and humility. She spoke about the importance of preserving artisan techniques in an industry increasingly dominated by corporate interests. She talked about mentoring young jewelers in Moscow. About finding meaning in craft rather than scale. She never mentioned Victoria. Not once. It was as if their entire partnership, and its explosive end, had never happened. Victoria watched from her table, Marcus's hand in hers, and felt something unexpected, relief. Not because Diana had forgiven her, she hadn't, not really. But because Diana had moved forward, built a life, found purpose. She'd been damaged by Victoria's choices, but not destroyed. She'd survived, adapted, continued. You okay? Marcus whispered. Yeah, Victoria said, surprised to find it was true. I think I am. After the ceremony, several people approached Victoria. Industry colleagues who'd heard about her sustainability initiatives. Young designers who'd received support from the Diana Volkova Fund. Even a few old rivals who grudgingly admitted respect for her transformation. But the moment that mattered most came near the end of the evening. Diana approached Victoria's table. No entourage. No security. Just her, carrying her award, looking tired but somehow lighter. Thank you for coming, Diana said formally. It couldn't have been easy. It needed to happen, Victoria replied. I needed to face what I'd done. To stop hiding behind charitable initiatives and think I'd atoned. Diana nodded. I'm not ready to forgive you. I may never be. But I appreciate that you tried. She paused. The fund, the one you created in my name. It's helping people. Really helping them. That matters more than revenge. It's the least I could do. No, Diana corrected. The least you could do was nothing. You chose to do something. That's not redemption. But it's a start. On the flight back to New York, Victoria was quiet. Processing. Marcus let her sit with her thoughts for the first hour before finally asking what she was feeling. Humbled, Victoria said. I spent years thinking I could fix everything with money and good intentions. But Diana's right. Some damage is permanent. Some choices can't be undone. Does that change how you feel about the work you've done? The fund? The initiatives? No. Victoria was certain about that. It just gives me a clearer understanding of what it actually means. I'm not atoning. I'm not erasing the past. I'm just trying to ensure the future is different. That the next generation of artisans doesn't get crushed by someone like the person I used to be. Marcus squeezed her hand. That's growth. Real, uncomfortable, unglamorous growth. You're not the hero of this story, Victoria. You're the cautionary tale who's trying to write a better ending. Is that enough? It has to be, Marcus said gently. Because it's all any of us can do. Acknowledge our mistakes. Take responsibility. Make different choices going forward. You can't control whether Diana forgives you. You can only control who you choose to be today. Later, in the darkness of their bedroom in New York, Victoria found herself thinking about the Maharaja's moon. The necklace she designed. The one that was supposed to crown her legacy. The one Diana had stolen to teach her a lesson. She'd never get it back. It was gone, sold to some private collector who'd never appreciate its meaning. $40 million vanished into the ether. But Victoria realized something. She didn't miss it. Not the way she thought she would. Because in losing it, she'd gained something more valuable: perspective. The necklace was just metal and stones. Beautiful, expensive, certainly. But ultimately meaningless without context. Without relationship. Without love. She turned to Marcus, sleeping beside her. This was what mattered. Not empires or jewelry or billionaire status. Just this. Two people who'd destroyed each other and somehow found their way back. Who'd learned to build success that included love instead of sacrificed it. "Thank you," Victoria whispered to the darkness. To Marcus. To the universe. To whatever force had given her a second chance she probably didn't deserve. Marcus stirred, pulled her closer in his sleep. And Victoria closed her eyes, finally at peace with her past. Not because it was resolved. Not because Diana had forgiven her. But because she'd faced it, acknowledged it, owned it, and committed to being different going forward. The confrontation is over. Diana has her award and her life in Moscow. Victoria has her empire and her marriage. They'll probably never speak again. There's no tearful reconciliation. No dramatic forgiveness. Just two women who were once partners, then enemies, now just two people moving forward on separate paths. Do you feel satisfied with how this played out? Or would you have wanted Victoria to do something different? To fight harder for forgiveness? Or maybe to never seek Diana out at all? There's no wrong answer here. Because real life doesn't always provide the catharsis we crave. Sometimes closure looks like accepting that some things can't be fixed. That some relationships can't be repaired. That growth means learning to live with the consequences of your choices without letting them define you. And sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemy. It's becoming someone who no longer needs enemies to feel successful. Life after Geneva settled into something Victoria had never experienced before: peace. Not the absence of problems. Not the smoothness of uninterrupted success. But the quiet confidence that comes from knowing who you are and being okay with it. Flaws and all. Diana Volkova returned to Moscow after the gala. Victoria heard through industry channels that she'd used the publicity from the Lifetime Achievement Award to launch a small mentorship program. Nothing massive. Just her, teaching traditional techniques to young Russian jewelers who couldn't afford formal training. It was exactly what Diana had always wanted to do. Small scale. High impact. Personal connection over commercial success. Victoria sent a donation to the program. Anonymous. Not to buy forgiveness. She knew better now. Just to support work that mattered. Diana probably knew it was from her. They never discussed it. Some apologies are made in silence. Celestial Crown continued its evolution. 3 years after the Geneva Gala, the company had transformed from a pure luxury brand into something more complex. A company that made beautiful things while also making a difference. The numbers told part of the story. Revenue had grown to $4.2 billion. But Victoria had learned that numbers were only part of the narrative. The more important metrics were harder to quantify. 80% of their materials now came from ethical sources. They'd created jobs for 200 artisans, not factory workers, actual craftspeople with fair wages and creative autonomy. The Diana Volkova Fund had supported 43 jewelers, 12 of whom had launched successful independent businesses. Victoria's board had initially resisted these initiatives, worried about profit margins. But they'd learned what Victoria had learned: purpose drives profit. Customers willing to pay luxury prices wanted to feel good about their purchases. Ethics had become part of the brand identity. "You've built something remarkable," Marcus said one evening. They were in their San Francisco house, having dinner on the deck overlooking the city. Not just profitable. Actually meaningful. "We built something remarkable," Victoria corrected. "I couldn't have done this without you. Without learning to prioritize relationships over revenue. without understanding that success means nothing if you're alone at the top. Marcus smiled. Look at you, getting all philosophical in your old age. I'm 37. Ancient. He kissed her. And I love every minute of it. The bigger change was internal. Victoria had spent her entire life running, from poverty, from insecurity, from the fear that she'd end up like her mother, working herself to death with nothing to show for it. But she'd finally stopped running. Finally accepted that she'd made it. Not just financially, though the money was nice, but emotionally. She'd built a life worth living. A relationship worth protecting. A business worth being proud of. I've been thinking, Victoria said to Marcus one Sunday morning. They were in bed late, a luxury they allowed themselves now. No urgent meetings. No crisis to manage. Just time. About having a child. Marcus went very still. Yeah. Victoria felt nervous saying it out loud. I know we've talked about it before. And I was always scared I'd be like my mother, always working, never present. Scared I'd prioritize the business over family. But I think I'm ready to try. To build a family that doesn't require someone to sacrifice everything. Marcus pulled her close. We'd be terrified parents. Completely unprepared. Making it up as we go. So yes. God, yes. He laughed, the sound full of joy and fear and possibility. Let's have a kid. Let's be terrified together. Let's figure out how to build a family while running businesses and maintaining our sanity. We're probably going to fail at the sanity part, Victoria warned. Probably, Marcus agreed. But we'll fail together. That's what matters. 6 months later, Victoria was pregnant. The news terrified her and thrilled her in equal measure. She was building a human. Someone who would depend on her completely. Someone who'd judge every choice she made through the lens of whether mom showed up or prioritized work. It forced Victoria to make harder decisions about delegation. About trust. About accepting that her empire wouldn't crumble if she took time away. She promoted 3 executives to C-suite positions. Gave them genuine authority. Started working 3 days a week instead of 6. Spent mornings at doctor's appointments and afternoons learning about nursery furniture and baby-proofing. Marcus was beside himself with excitement. He designed a nursery that was simultaneously functional and beautiful. Natural light, sustainable materials, space that would grow with the child. He read parenting books obsessively. Took online courses about infant care. Went to every single doctor's appointment. We're having a daughter, Victoria told him after the 20-week ultrasound. She was crying, which was becoming embarrassingly common. A girl. Marcus's eyes filled with tears too. The girl. We're going to have a daughter. They decided to name her Lynn. After Victoria's mother. The woman who'd sacrificed everything so her daughter could have opportunities she'd never had. The woman who'd cleaned other people's houses so Victoria could dream bigger. It felt right. Cyclical. Honoring the past while building toward the future. Lynn Shenloran was born on a Tuesday in March, weighing 7 pounds and 4 ounces. She had Marcus's eyes and Victoria's determination, evident from the way she screamed her displeasure at being removed from the womb. Victoria held her daughter for the first time and felt something fundamental shift in her understanding of success. This was what mattered. Not billions or empires or flagship stores. Just this tiny human who depended on her. Who would look to her for guidance and love and example. Hey Lynn, Victoria whispered. I'm your mom. And I promise, I'm going to do better than I knew how to do before. I'm going to show up. Be present. Choose you over meetings and deals and the next level of success. Marcus, standing beside the hospital bed, put his hand on Victoria's shoulder. We're going to be okay, he said softly. All 3 of us. We're going to figure this out. And somehow, Victoria believed him. The first year of Lynn's life was harder than building a billion-dollar company. Sleep deprivation. Constant worry. The bone-deep exhaustion of caring for another human 24 hours a day. But it was also beautiful. Watching Lynn discover her hands. Hearing her first laugh. Seeing Marcus hold their daughter while singing off-key lullabies at 3 a.m. Victoria took 6 months of maternity leave. Actually took it, not working from home, not checking emails constantly, actually away. Her team handled everything. The company didn't implode. The world kept turning. When she returned to work, it was part-time. 3 days a week in the office. 2 days working from home. Weekends sacred, no work, no exceptions. She missed milestones in her career. Board meetings she would have attended before. Networking events that might have led to opportunities. But she didn't miss Lynn's first steps. Her first word, death, which Marcus was insufferably proud of. The way she'd reach for Victoria when she came home from work, like mom was the center of her universe. These were the moments Victoria had almost sacrificed for an empire. These were the things that actually mattered. 3 years after Lynn was born, Victoria received an email that made her laugh and cry simultaneously. It was from Diana Volkova. Professional, but meaningful. I saw the news about your daughter. Congratulations. I hope parenthood teaches you what business never could, that some things are more valuable than gold. D. Victoria read it 3 times. Then wrote back equally brief, it already has. Thank you, V. That was it. No long reconciliation. No friendship rekindled. Just 2 women acknowledging each other's humanity. Sometimes that's enough. By the time Lynn was 5, she was already asking questions that made Victoria's heart hurt in the best way. Mama, why do you work? They were having breakfast together. Victoria had started a tradition of breakfast with Lynn before heading to the office. No phones. No distractions. Just them. Because I like creating beautiful things, Victoria answered honestly. But also because I want to show you that you can build something meaningful while also being present for the people you love. Grandma Lynn worked a lot too, right? Lynn had heard stories about her namesake. But she was sad. Victoria's throat tightened. She was. Because she had to work all the time just to survive. She didn't have choices. But she made sure I did have choices. And now I get to make sure you have even more. So you work because you want to, not because you have to? Exactly. Victoria pulled her daughter close. And the day you need me to work less, you tell me. Because you're more important than any business. Always. Lynn considered this with the seriousness only a 5-year-old could muster. Can I have more pancakes? Victoria laughed. Absolutely. Looking at where everyone ended up, that's the question, isn't it? Diana Volkova runs her mentorship program in Moscow. Not wealthy by American standards, but comfortable. Respected. Teaching the next generation. Living a life aligned with her values, even if it's not the one she originally planned. Marcus's architecture firm is now one of the leading sustainable design companies in the country. He's designing buildings that will outlast both of them. Creating spaces that serve communities. He's successful on his own terms, not riding Victoria's coattails. And Victoria? She's worth $4.2 billion. Celestial Crown continues to grow. But the number that matters more is 5, Lynn's age. The number of years Victoria has prioritized being a present parent over being an empire builder. She's learned that success looks different at different stages of life. That the empire she was so desperate to build at 25 matters less than the family she's building at 38. Giuseppe, her old mentor, passed away 2 years ago. At his funeral, he'd left Victoria a note. You learned well. Not just the craft, the lesson. That what we create matters less than how we treat the people who help us create it. I'm proud of you. Some people would call this karma. Diana's revenge teaching Victoria humility. Victoria's transformation leading to genuine happiness. The universe balancing scales. But Victoria doesn't think it's karma. She thinks it's just consequences. Choices creating ripples. Actions having reactions. She made ruthless decisions and paid the price in loneliness and regret. She made different choices and discovered a different life was possible. No divine intervention. No cosmic justice. Just a woman learning through pain that the empire she'd been building was hollow without people to share it with. Do you ever regret it? Marcus asked her once, during one of their late-night conversations. The years we lost. The time we wasted being apart. Victoria thought about it honestly. I regret hurting you. Hurting Diana. making choices that prioritized ambition over integrity. But I don't regret the journey, because I don't think I could have appreciated this life, if I hadn't first learned what it felt like to have everything and feel nothing. That's very zen of you. I contain multitudes, Victoria said with a smile. Ruthless businesswoman and devoted mother. Ice queen and romantic. I'm learning I don't have to choose between versions of myself. I just have to integrate them. Looking at where everyone ended up, Diana in Moscow, Marcus with his architecture, Victoria with her family and her transformed company, Lynn growing up with parents who are present and partnered. Do you believe in karma? Or is this just the natural consequence of choices? People making decisions, living with outcomes, learning from mistakes, and choosing differently going forward? I want to hear what you think. Because Victoria's story isn't about divine justice or cosmic revenge. It's about a woman who built an empire on sacrifice and nearly lost herself in the process. Who learned, painfully, that some costs are too high. That some choices can't be undone but can be learned from. And that sometimes the greatest success isn't building a billion-dollar empire. It's building a life worth living with people worth loving. So what does Victoria's story actually teach us? Because if you've stayed with me for nearly 3 hours, and I genuinely appreciate that you have, you deserve more than just entertainment. You deserve the lessons embedded in this messy, complicated, ultimately hopeful story. Here's what Victoria learned, and what I think we can all take away. Success without connection is just expensive loneliness. Victoria built a $3 billion empire. She had penthouses and private jets and the kind of wealth most people can't even imagine. But she was hollow inside. Empty. Because she'd sacrificed the relationships that made success meaningful in pursuit of success itself. The real turning point wasn't when she made her first billion. It was when she finally understood that no amount of money could fill the space where love used to be. Victoria gives a talk now. Once a year at NYU, her alma mater. She speaks to business students, hungry, ambitious kids who remind her of herself at that age. Kids who think success means conquering. Who believe wealth equals worth. This is what she tells them. I'm going to give you advice that contradicts everything you'll learn in your other classes. Your professors will teach you to maximize profit, to identify opportunities, to scale aggressively. And they're not wrong, those skills matter. But here's what they won't teach you. The cost of winning matters more than the win itself. She pauses. Lets that sink in. I built my empire by destroying someone who trusted me. By prioritizing growth over integrity. By convincing myself that success justified any sacrifice. And you know what? It worked. I got everything I wanted. The money. The recognition. The power. But I lost the person I wanted to be. Lost the man I loved. Lost years of my life to the pursuit of more when I already had enough. So here's my real advice. Build something that lets you sleep at night. Create success that doesn't require casualties. And if you have to choose between an opportunity and your integrity, choose integrity. Every single time. Because opportunities come back. Integrity, once lost, is almost impossible to recover. The students always have questions. Usually some version of, but isn't that naive? Won't someone more ruthless just crush you? Victoria's answer is always the same. Maybe. But I'd rather be crushed by someone else's ruthlessness than destroyed by my own. Because at least then I can rebuild knowing I didn't compromise who I am. She means it too. Because she's lived both versions. Been the ruthless one and been the one trying to rebuild after ruthlessness destroyed her from the inside out. The second version is harder. But it's also more sustainable. More honest. More human. Lynn is 7 now. She doesn't fully understand what her mother does. The concept of billions is abstract when you're in 2nd grade. But she understands that her mom makes jewelry and sometimes travels for work but always comes home for dinner. She understands that both her parents work, but neither of them work so much they disappear. That success doesn't have to mean absence. That you can build something impressive while still being present for the people you love. These are lessons Victoria's mother never got to teach her. Because Lynn Chen, the original Lynn, didn't have choices. She cleaned houses because it was the only option. She worked herself to exhaustion because survival demanded it. But Victoria has choices. And the choice she makes every day is to prioritize her daughter over her empire. To leave meetings early for school plays. To turn down opportunities that would require too much travel. To model a version of success that includes presence, not just profit. Breaking generational patterns looks like this. Not just making more money than your parents, but making different choices. Building a life they would have chosen if they'd had the option. As for Diana, Victoria thinks about her sometimes. Wonders if she's happy in Moscow. If she's found peace with how things turned out. If she ever thinks about what they could have built together. But Victoria doesn't feel guilty anymore. Not because what she did was right, it wasn't. But because she's done the work to make amends. Created the fund. Changed her business practices. Apologized face to face without expecting forgiveness. Some debts can't be repaid. Some damage is permanent. But you can still choose to be different going forward. To ensure your past mistakes don't become your future patterns. That's not redemption. That's just responsibility. Owning your choices and their consequences. Living with the weight of what you've done while refusing to let it define what you do next. Diana's revenge, stealing the Maharaja's moon, taught Victoria a lesson she desperately needed to learn, that losing something precious shows you what actually matters. That sometimes the universe takes away what you think you need so you can discover what you actually need. Victoria needed to lose that necklace. Needed the wake-up call. Needed the reminder that empires built on other people's destruction eventually collapse under their own weight. Here's what I want you to take away from Victoria's story. You don't have to destroy others to succeed. You don't have to sacrifice relationships for ambition. You don't have to become someone you're ashamed of to build something impressive. Success that requires you to lose yourself isn't success. It's just an expensive disguise worn by someone who's forgotten who they are. The real measure of a life well lived isn't the size of your bank account or the scale of your empire. It's whether you can look at yourself in the mirror and like the person staring back. Whether the people you love feel loved. Whether your success serves something beyond your ego. Victoria learned this the hard way. Through loss and loneliness and the painful realization that she traded everything meaningful for things that meant nothing. But she learned. Built a different kind of empire. One that included love and family and integrity alongside profit and growth. That's the real transformation. Not from poor to rich. From broken to successful. But from hollow to whole. From driven by fear to guided by values. From measuring worth by wealth to measuring it by the life you've actually built. Victoria's story doesn't have a perfect ending. Because real life doesn't work that way. Diana hasn't forgiven her. The Maharaja's moon is still lost. The years Victoria and Marcus spent apart can't be recovered. But they're building something now. Together. A family. A life. A version of success that's sustainable because it's not built on sacrifice and destruction. Is that karma? Divine justice? Or just the natural consequence of learning from mistakes and choosing differently? I think it's the latter. I think we create our own karma through our choices. Victoria chose ambition over integrity and paid the price. She chose differently later and built a different life. No magic. No cosmic intervention. Just a woman learning painfully that the empire you build matters less than the person you become while building it. So if you're watching this and you're at a crossroads, choosing between an opportunity and your values, between success and integrity, between more and enough, remember Victoria's story. Remember that the cost of winning matters. That some victories are actually defeats. That the empire you're so desperate to build might be the thing that destroys you. But also remember that transformation is possible. That you can change. That mistakes don't have to define you if you're willing to own them and do better. Victoria went from the ice queen who destroyed her partner to a woman building a life based on connection instead of conquest. If she can change, maybe we all can. The question isn't whether you'll make mistakes. You will. We all do. The question is, what will you do after? Will you defend them? Justify them? Repeat them? Or will you learn from them, own them, and choose differently going forward? That's the real story. Not Victoria's empire. Her evolution. From someone who thought success meant having everything to someone who understands that success means being someone worth being. And that necklace that changed everything? It wasn't the Maharaja's moon. It was never about the jewelry. It was the copper wire ring Marcus made her when they were broke and in love and building dreams on kitchen tables. That was the necklace that mattered. The one that reminded her what she'd lost. What she'd sacrificed. What was actually worth fighting for. Everything else was just expensive distraction from what actually made her rich, being loved for who she was, not what she'd built. Thank you for staying with me through this entire journey. If Victoria's story resonated with you, if it made you think differently about success or integrity or what actually matters in life, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story, someone chasing success at the cost of everything else, share it with them. Sometimes we all need a reminder that the empire isn't the point. The person building it is. We've just spent 3 hours together following Victoria Chen's extraordinary journey. From a girl scrubbing floors in other people's mansions to a woman building a $3 billion empire. From someone who thought success meant conquering to someone who learned it meant connecting. From the ice queen who sacrificed love for ambition to a woman who discovered that love was the only ambition worth having. This story had everything. Romance and revenge. Betrayal and redemption. The cost of ruthless ambition and the price of second chances. But at its core, it was about something universal, learning what actually matters before it's too late. Victoria lost Marcus by choosing her empire over their marriage. Lost Diana by choosing growth over integrity. Lost herself by measuring worth in dollars instead of relationships. But she got a second chance, not because she deserved it, but because she finally did the work to become someone worthy of it. What makes Victoria's story matter isn't the billions or the jewelry or even the dramatic theft that changed everything. It's that she represents something we all struggle with, the tension between ambition and connection. Between building something impressive and being someone we're proud of. We live in a world that celebrates hustle culture and grinding and sacrificing everything for success. That tells us we're not enough unless we're constantly achieving, constantly growing, constantly reaching for more. Victoria bought into that story. And it nearly destroyed her. But then she learned a different story. One where success includes love instead of excludes it. Where building an empire doesn't require destroying people who trust you. Where enough is actually enough when you're sharing it with people who matter. That's the lesson that transcends her specific circumstances. Whether you're building a business or raising a family or just trying to figure out how to be happy, the cost of winning matters more than the win itself. If you're watching this and you're struggling, working multiple jobs, sacrificing time with loved ones, convinced you'll find happiness once you hit that next milestone, please hear this. Victoria hit every milestone. Made billions. Built an empire. Conquered her industry. And she was miserable. Empty. Alone. Because milestones don't make you happy. Relationships do. Connection does. Being someone you're proud of does. Your circumstances don't define your worth. Your choices do. How you treat people matters more than how much you achieve. The legacy you leave isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in the lives you touched and the person you became. Victoria's mother cleaned houses. Never had wealth or status or opportunities. But she raised a daughter who changed the world. That's a legacy worth more than any empire. And Victoria? She'll be remembered not for the billions she made, but for the integrity she reclaimed. For the fund that helped artisans. For the daughter she raised with presence instead of presence. For choosing love over loneliness. That's what transformation looks like. Not perfect. Just better. Just choosing differently each day until those choices become who you are. If this 3-hour story moved you, inspired you, or taught you something valuable about resilience, success, and what actually matters in life, please leave a like and share your biggest takeaway in the comments. I read every single one. Your insights make this community special. And I want to know, what resonated with you most? Was it Victoria's struggle with ambition? Marcus's decision to give her a second chance? The lesson about building success that doesn't require casualties? Tell me, because these stories aren't just entertainment. They're conversations about how we choose to live. About what we prioritize. about who we want to become. Next time, I'll be telling you about Sarah Martinez, a single mother who lost everything in the 2008 financial crisis and rebuilt her life into something her banker ex-husband could never have imagined. Her story of going from homeless to owning a real estate empire will absolutely blow your mind. You won't want to miss it. But before you go, I want to leave you with this. Remember, you are not defined by what others think of you. Not by the people who underestimated you. Not by the ones who hurt you. Not by the circumstances that tried to break you. You are defined by how you respond when life tests you. By the choices you make when no one's watching. By the integrity you maintain when it would be easier to compromise. Victoria Chen proved that the best response to cruelty isn't revenge. It's building a life so beautiful, so meaningful, so rich in the ways that actually matter, that your critics become irrelevant. Her former partner Diana wanted revenge. She got it by stealing a $40 million necklace. But Victoria's real loss wasn't the jewelry. It was the years she spent building an empire while forgetting to build a life. The revenge wasn't what Diana took. It was what Victoria had already lost by choosing wrong. But here's the beautiful part. Victoria got it back. Not the necklace. Something better. She got herself back. Got Lebec. Got the ability to sleep at night knowing she was someone worth being. So wherever you are in your journey, whether you're at the bottom looking up, at the top feeling empty, or somewhere in between trying to figure out what success even means, remember Victoria's story. Remember that empires are impressive but intimacy is essential. That success without connection is just expensive loneliness. That the person you become matters more than what you achieve. Build something beautiful. But don't sacrifice your soul to build it. Create success that lets you sleep at night. Choose integrity over opportunity when they conflict. And never, ever convince yourself that people who love you are obstacles to overcome rather than treasures to protect. Until next time, stay strong. Stay focused. Stay true to who you are, not who others expect you to be. And never let anyone convince you that you're nothing. You're everything you choose to become. Every single day you get to choose. Choose wisely. Please hit the subscribe button and see you on the next one.